One other area of your research that I think seems very important to talk about right now is the use of racial resentment to help to manipulate these people. And we've seen, you referenced, the belief that this is a disease that only affects non-white people. That certainly is out there. There have been early and persistent attempts to brand this as the Chinese virus or the China virus. And we've seen a rise in hate crimes against Asian Americans or Asians in America. What do you think about this as a strategy? Will they continue to do this? Will it be effective to try to tie race so closely to this virus?
It's race, but it's also othering. In other words, with this virus, everybody wants to feel like, oh, I'm not at risk because it's somebody else's fault, or what's happening right now is somebody else's fault. And so I would just say, first, as a kind of empathic, I'm not trying to in any way excuse racism, but I would just say, as a natural human response at this moment, we all want to feel like what's happening to us isn't the result of our own vulnerability in a particular way. So I think people right now, they're afraid, they're terrified, they're looking for some answer to something that makes absolutely no sense. And that's why I think it's irresponsible at any time of leadership to convey messages like that, but especially in a time like this, where again the need for us to come together is so powerful, to play into scripts of race and racism, blaming not just China, but all this Asian American sentiment that's happening now that's terrible, tons of racism. In a way, it plays to people's fear, it plays to people's tribalism, and it's a reflection of irresponsible leadership in a way. I think that really what we need to be doing is to be combating, tribalism and racism are as dangerous for us right now as the virus, because when we isolate in tribes, we can't kind of marshal a coordinated response to the virus in a way. And so, in a way, responsible leadership would basically be saying nobody is safe until everybody is safe, which is really biologically true right now with this virus. So to say, we're going to limit these people, or we're going to, it's those guys over there, in a way, it's obviously hugely problematic from a moral and ethical standpoint, but it's also making our country, much more at risk to the virus itself.
Yeah. I think you raise a great point that we want to believe that for X reason or Y reason, we're not going to be affected in the same way. It might be a class thing or a race thing or a religious thing or I believe there's a miracle cure, so I don't have to worry about a thing. But one thing that I'm curious about is I would have guessed, if you'd asked me at the very beginning of this, that there would be a certain number of deaths that would be, you wouldn't be able to convince people that this wasn't a serious problem. And I would have guessed and been wrong early on that at 45,000 American deaths, there'd be no way to not acknowledge that this is an absolute disaster. But clearly I was wrong about that. They can do that. They're doing that every day. Is there a number where you think they won't be able to deny it if this hits 90 or 200 or 500,000? Will then some of this manipulation be less effective?
I mean, in every life lost to this tragedy is itself a tragedy. My
Yes.
family, my father lost his best friend this morning. It's a moment where
I'm very sorry to hear
death,
that.
death is just indiscriminate right now. But I would also say that the number of deaths at this point, I mean, we're going to see a lot more, but right now, the number of deaths to coronavirus in this country reported are the same number of deaths that we see in gun violence in this country, roughly.
Hmm.
And in a way, you would think that it's like, couldn't we all come together as humans to present this kind of tragedy? But what we saw is the more desperate people get, the more polarized they get. The more these kind of scripts that we're talking about become much, much more intense in a way. And so I think the danger of this I mean, hopefully, again, people will be able to come together. But I would say that I've just seen in my research that with gun research, the more tragedy there was, the more ideological people became, the more fractured they became, the harder it became to form common sense solutions. And
Mm.
so I think there's no number at which we're all going to kind of come together at the middle. The work is still the same. The work of trying to build divides, the work of trying to talk to people who might not agree with us, but that really we need them for our safety, and they need us for their safety. So I don't think there is some kind of magic number here. And in fact, based on my research, the worse it gets, the more fractured people get, the more ideological people get. And so in that sense, I just think it makes it doubly important to try to bridge divides now while we still can.
Jonathan Metzl, professor and author of Dying of Whiteness, thank you once again for joining us.
Thanks so much.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.